It's a girl. Elias didn't look up. His knife continued its meticulous dance across the wood, shaping a miniature bird. A girl, Clara repeated, her voice softer now, laced with a touch of hurt. The knife slipped, a thin line of red welling on Elias's fingertip. He didn't flinch. "Did you hear me, Elias?" Clara asked, her voice tight. He wrapped his finger in a scrap of cloth. Yes, he finally looked up, his eyes distant. "A girl. Aren't you happy?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Elias picked up a worn photograph, his gaze fixed on the smiling faces frozen in time. His parents, his younger sister. The workshop, usually filled with the comforting scent of cedar and sawdust, felt suffocating. He set the photo down. "Of course. You sound it." Clara moved closer, her hand resting tentatively on his arm. He flinched, pulling away. "I have work." He turned back to the half-finished bird. Clara sighed. "Elias, please. This is important. Everything is important, Clara." He picked up his knife again, the sharp edge glinting in the dim light. "The roof needs fixing. The shed door is hanging by a thread. We need firewood." Clara's hand fell to her side. "This is our child we're talking about, I know." He kept his eyes on his work. A sharp rap echoed through the small workshop. The door swung open, revealing Sophie, Clara's mother. "Clara, dear, are you here bothering Elias again?" Sophie's voice dripped with disapproval. Clara straightened. "Mother, I was just distracting him from his important work, I'm sure." Sophie's gaze settled on Elias. "Always with these toys." She gestured dismissively at the wooden bird. A grown man playing with trinkets. Elias remained silent, his knife still moving. Clara stepped between them. "Mother, Elias is making a gift for the baby." Sophie's lips thinned. "A gift? What good is a wooden bird when your child needs a father who's present, not lost in some childish fantasy?" Clara's shoulders slumped. I told him, Mother, about the baby." Sophie's eyes widened. "And what did he say?" Clara's voice cracked. "Nothing. He just shut down." Tears welled in her eyes. Sophie put a comforting arm around her daughter. There, dear. He'll come around. He just needs a firm hand." She glared at Elias. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. He placed the miniature bird on the workbench, next to the worn photograph. The waiting room at Dr. Morrow's clinic was small and stuffy. Elias shifted uncomfortably on the hard wooden chair. Clara's hand found his, squeezing gently. "Nervous," she whispered. He shook his head. The door opened, and Dr. Moreau beckoned them in. After the examination, Dr. Moreau sat across from them, his expression serious. "The pregnancy is progressing, but Clara, you need to avoid stress." He turned to Elias. "This is crucial. You need to support her, emotionally as well as physically." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on a framed medical diploma on the wall. "I understand." Dr. Moreau leaned forward. "Elias, a high-risk pregnancy is unpredictable. Clara needs you to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying?" Elias shifted again. "Yes?" Dr. Moreau sighed, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird. "A little something for the little one," he said, handing it to Clara. "It's important to have something to hold on to, something that represents hope." Clara's face lit up. "It's beautiful, Doctor. Thank you." She looked at Elias, her eyes shining. "Isn't it beautiful, Elias?" He nodded, his gaze lingering on the bird for a moment before he looked away. "I made this for you." Clara held out a small, wrapped package. Elias took it, his fingers clumsy. He unwrapped the gift, a wooden bird, almost identical to the one he'd lost as a child. He stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. It's like the one," Clara smiled. "I know. I saw the drawing in your workshop." He clutched the bird tightly, his knuckles white. He saw himself, a young boy, meticulously carving a similar bird for his sister Leslie. They were sitting in the forest, sunlight dappling through the leaves. "Leslie," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Clara touched his arm. "Elias, are you all right?" He pulled away, his eyes filled with a sudden panic. I need to finish the roof." He turned and strode back towards the workshop, leaving Clara standing alone, the unshed tears glistening in her eyes. You think you can just ignore me, Elias? Sophie's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of Elias's workshop. He didn't turn around. I have work to do. Work? Sophie scoffed. Hiding in here, carving your little toys, that's not work. That's... Elias's hands clenched around the wooden bird. He spun around, his eyes blazing. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through. Sophie's face hardened. I know you're not being a proper husband to my daughter. She needs you, Elias, and you're shutting her out, just like you shut everyone out. Elias's voice cracked. I lost my family, Sophie. My parents, my sister. I was there. I saw it happen, and I couldn't save them. He turned away, his shoulders shaking. Sophie's expression softened, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. My husband, he died when Clara was just a baby. I never talked about it, never let myself grieve. I just kept going. For Clara, she reached out, her hand hovering hesitantly over his shoulder. He flinched, but didn't pull away. The scent of wood smoke and roasting chestnuts filled the air. Music drifted from the village square, where brightly coloured banners fluttered in the breeze. Clara tugged at Elias's sleeve. Come on, Elias. It'll be fun. He hesitated, his gaze drawn to the forest at the edge of the village. I don't really feel like it. Pierre clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, old friend. A little celebration never hurt anyone. Besides, you need to relax. Clara's worried about you. Clara's eyes pleaded with him. He sighed, allowing himself to be pulled towards the festivities. Sophie stood by the fountain, her gaze fixed on Elias. Look at him, she said to a group of villagers. Mooning about like a lovesick schoolboy. He has no sense of responsibility. A wife, a child on the way, and he's off in his own little world. Clara's face flushed. Mother, please, he's just... Sophie cut her off. Just what, Clara? Just irresponsible. Just immature. A man his age should be providing for his family, not playing make-believe in the woods. The villagers murmured in agreement, their eyes fixed on Elias. He felt a wave of shame wash over him. He met Clara's gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. He turned and walked away, the laughter and music fading behind him as he disappeared into the shadows of the forest. He was alone, swallowed by the trees, the whispers of his fantasy world beckoning him closer. Rain lashed against the workshop windows, mirroring the storm raging inside Elias. He stared at the unfinished bird, the smooth wood, a stark contrast to the rough edges of his emotions. A heavy knock startled him. He opened the door to find Vlad, a burly man with a menacing grin, standing on his doorstep. Elias, Vlad said, his voice a low growl. We need to talk about your debt. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. I'm working on it, Vlad chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Elias's spine. Working on it? That's not what I heard. I heard you were too busy playing with your toys to worry about real-life problems. He gestured towards the workshop. Like paying back the money you owe me. Elias's hands clenched into fists. I'll have it soon. Vlad stepped closer, his eyes glinting with malice. Soon isn't good enough, Elias. I need it now, or you'll face the consequences. He leaned in, his voice a menacing whisper. And trust me, you won't like the consequences. Vlad's gaze drifted to Clara, who stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale. Your pretty little wife wouldn't like them either. He grinned, a cruel twist of his lips. Maybe she can help you pay off your debt. I hear she's quite resourceful. Elias stepped in front of Clara, shielding her from Vlad's predatory gaze. Get out, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Vlad laughed. You think you can threaten me, Elias? In your own home? You're pathetic. He turned to leave, then paused. I'll be back, Elias, and next time I won't be so patient. A sharp cry pierced the night, tearing Elias from his restless sleep. He found Clara clutching her stomach, her face contorted in pain. Elias, she gasped. The baby, it's coming. Panic surged through him. It's too early, he whispered, his voice trembling. He rushed to her side, his hands hovering helplessly. Get Dr. Moreau, Clara cried, her voice strained. He raced through the rain-soaked streets, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Dr. Moreau asleep in his clinic, his face etched with concern as he listened to Elias's frantic explanation. They hurried back to the workshop, where Clara lay writhing in agony. Dr. Moreau examined her, his brow furrowed. "It's a breech birth," he said, his voice grave. "We need to get her to the hospital, now." Elias helped carry Clara to the cot, his hands shaking. Sophie arrived, her face pale with worry. "What's happening?" she cried. "Clara's in labor," Elias said, his voice tight. "It's too early." Sophie pushed past him, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Clara, my dear, you'll be all right. I'm here." She climbed into the cart, holding Clara's hand. As they raced towards the hospital, the storm intensified, the wind howling like a banshee. The hospital room was dimly lit, the only sound Clara's ragged breathing. Dr. Moreau worked tirelessly, his face grim. Sophie stood by Clara's side, whispering words of encouragement. Elias paced outside, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. He heard a muffled cry, then silence. The door opened, and Dr. Moreau emerged, his shoulders slumped. "It's a girl," he said, his voice heavy. "But..." Elias's breath caught in his throat. "But what, Clara? She's lost a lot of blood. We're doing everything we can, but..." Dr. Moreau's voice trailed off. Sophie came out, her eyes red-rimmed. "She wants to see you," she whispered. Elias entered the room, his legs trembling. Clara lay pale and still, her hand reaching out for him. He took it, his own hand cold and clammy. "Elias," she whispered, her voice weak. "I love you. Please, be strong, for our daughter." Her grip tightened, then went slack. Elias stared at her lifeless hand, his heart shattering into a million pieces. Sophie rushed to Clara's side, her sobs echoing through the room. Elias stood frozen, unable to comprehend the enormity of his loss. He had failed her. He had failed them both. The workshop was a disaster zone. Tools lay scattered across the floor, wood shavings piled high, the unfinished bird lying broken amidst the debris. Elias swung a hammer, his rage fueling his every move. He smashed the workbench, the shelves, the windows, each blow a release of pent-up grief and guilt. He collapsed amidst the wreckage, his body racked with sobs. He had pushed her away, shut her out, retreated into his fantasy world when she needed him most. He had failed to protect her, just as he had failed to protect Leslie. He was cursed, a bringer of misfortune. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Father Bernard, the village priest, his kind eyes filled with concern. "Elias," Father Bernard said gently. "Sophie told me what happened. I'm so sorry." Elias stared at him, his eyes hollow. "It's my fault," he whispered. "I killed them both." Father Bernard shook his head. "No, Elias, you didn't kill anyone. Grief, it can be a powerful force. It can cloud our judgment, make us do things we regret, but it doesn't define us." He entered the workshop, his gaze taking in the destruction. "You need to forgive yourself, Elias. Clara wouldn't want you to blame yourself." Elias shook his head, his voice choked with emotion. "I can't. I broke my promise. I promised Leslie. I promised my mother that I would always protect them." Father Bernard placed a comforting hand on Elias's shoulder. "Sometimes, Elias, even when we try our best, we can't protect the ones we love. But that doesn't mean we failed them. Love. It's a powerful force too. It transcends death. It lives on in the memories we cherish, in the lessons we learn, in the people we touch." He paused, his eyes filled with compassion. "Clara loved you, Elias, and she knew you loved her. Don't let grief rob you of that truth." The church was filled with the scent of incense and the hushed whispers of mourners. Elias stood by Clara's coffin, his face etched with grief. He looked down at his daughter, cradled in Sophie's arms, her tiny face a mirror of Clara's. He felt a surge of love, mixed with profound sense of loss. He had failed Clara, but he wouldn't fail his daughter. He would protect her, cherish her, give her the love he had been unable to fully give Clara. As the priest began the service, Elias closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He saw Leslie, his sister, standing before him, her face radiant. "It's not your fault, Elias," she whispered. "You couldn't have saved us, but you can save her." She gestured towards his daughter. "She needs you. Don't let your fear hold you back. Embrace your gift. Use it to protect her, to heal her, to love her." Elias opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on his daughter. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a sense of peace he hadn't felt since the accident. He understood. His fantastical world, his gift. It wasn't a curse. It was a part of him, a manifestation of his love, his grief, his hope. He could use it to heal, to protect, to love. He knelt beside Sophie, his hand reaching out to touch his daughter's tiny hand. He felt a surge of energy, a connection, a promise. He would never forget Clara, but he would live for his daughter. He would honor Clara's memory by embracing life, by loving fiercely, by protecting his daughter with everything he had. He would build a bridge, not to escape the past, but to connect it to the future, a future filled with love, hope, and the memory of Clara's unwavering faith in him. Elias stood before the dilapidated bridge in his fantastical forest, the symbol of his broken promises. He raised his hand, his fingertips glowing with a soft golden light. He focused his emotions, his grief, his love, his determination, channeling them into the bridge. The wood creaked and groaned, then began to mend itself, the gaps closing, the splintered edges smoothing, the structure growing stronger, more vibrant. He wasn't escaping anymore. He was rebuilding, reconnecting, reclaiming his life, his love, his future. He returned to the workshop, the remnants of his rage and despair, replaced by a sense of purpose. He picked up the broken bird, the gift Clara had made for him. He held it gently, his fingertips tracing the intricate carvings. He closed his eyes, picturing Clara's smile, her warmth, her unwavering love. He opened his eyes, his gaze firm, his heart filled with bittersweet resolve. He would never forget her, but he would live. He would love. He would protect. He would honor her memory by embracing the future, by being the father his daughter needed, by building a life filled with love, hope, and the echoes of Clara's laughter. He picked up his tools, the familiar weight comforting in his hands. He began to carve, a new bird taking shape, a symbol of hope, a testament to the enduring power of love, a bridge between the past and the future. The sun streamed through the workshop window, casting a warm glow on the unfinished bird, a promise of a new beginning, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a whisper of hope in the face of despair. Elias smiled, a genuine smile, the first in a long time. He wasn't alone. He had his daughter. He had Clara's memory. He had his gift. And he would use it to build a future worthy of the love he had lost and the love he had found. The hospital room was filled with the soft coos of a newborn. Elias sat beside Clara's bed, his daughter nestled in his arms. He gazed at her tiny face, her delicate features a perfect blend of Clara and himself. He felt a surge of love, so profound it ached. He leaned down, his lips brushing against his daughter's forehead. "I promise," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never leave you. I'll always protect you. I'll love you with everything I have." He looked up at Clara, her eyes closed, her face serene. "I love you, Clara," he whispered. "And I'll never forget you." He stood up, holding his daughter close, his heart filled with a bittersweet mixture of grief and hope. He walked out of the hospital, into the bright sunshine, a new chapter beginning, a future unwritten, a promise to keep. He carried his daughter home, to the workshop filled with memories, and the unfinished bird that would forever symbolize the bridge between his broken promises and his newfound hope. He placed his daughter in her crib, the intricately carved wooden bird watching over her, a silent guardian, a testament to the enduring power of love. He picked up his tools, his hands steady, his gaze clear. He would rebuild. He would heal. He would love. He would live. For Clara. For his daughter. For himself. The sun set, casting long shadows across the workshop, but Elias didn't flinch. He was no longer afraid of the darkness. He had found his light, his purpose, his future, and he would embrace it with open arms. A father, a survivor, a man reborn from the ashes of his grief. The bridge was broken, but the promises remained, etched in his heart, a guiding light on his journey towards a future filled with love and hope. The end.